Now, the refugee crisis has its origins in the war in Syria. Around 6 million people have fled the country. Now, with the cessation of hostilities in place since the 27th of February, the latest round of peace talks are due to be held in Geneva next week. It's hoped the opposition High Negotiations Committee can be persuaded to attend, although they are yet to confirm that they will. For more analysis on the war and the relative peace, we can speak to Renad Mansour from the Carnegie Middle East Institute in Beirut. Renad Mansour, good to speak to you this morning. So, in your opinion, if you will please, who's benefited the most from the pause in the fighting?
Yeah, well, it seems like there has been, to some extent, a cessation of hostilities, of gunfights between those that were involved in the original deal. That's to say that there are still conflict occurring to those that were not up in the deal, for example, Jabhat al-Nusra, and also we're waiting to see how ISIS, we don't expect, the Islamic State, for example, to cease its hostilities. But there has been some relative ceasefire, which is really, like, for example, looking at the Russian jets, and the Russian involvement has quieted down, especially after what happened in Aleppo last week. So to some extent there has been some ceasefire, but it's on very shaky foundation, and many are actually not expecting it to last that long. They're just waiting for it to tilt over while it's on the brink right now.
And the one that's benefited the most is the Syrian regime, because they've been able to take a pause in fighting, perhaps build new defences and perhaps prepare for the end of this war on their terms. Yeah.
And it seems like with these negotiations, the biggest proponents of it are both the U.S. and Russia. The regime seems to be also quite okay with the ceasefire and moving forward, because I think the regime, to a large extent, has kind of realized that it will remain. So the biggest problem with this is actually the opposition. The opposition feel like they haven't really won yet, that they have much more to gain, and they're not gaining as much, and also that they're so divided. There's so many different groups in the opposition, as well as gray areas as to who are legitimate and who are illegitimate. So really what you have with these negotiations and expectations for Geneva 3 are Russia and the U.S., particularly the U.S., that are very keen to get some sort of agreement. The regional allies that are telling their proxies, okay, we're being told that we need to reach some sort of agreement, but those on the ground, really an agreement and ceasefire and moving forward is far from reality in their perspective.
Now, Bashar al-Assad has said he'll hold some kind of elections in April. Do you expect that at Geneva 3, the US may just fall into line and allow Assad to stay in power for the greater good and the fight against Daesh to intensify, perhaps?
Yeah, it seems like throughout this whole process of negotiations, no one was really addressing this question: what actually happens to Bashar al-Assad, which is obviously one of the key demands of the opposition. It seems like they wanted to move forward with first ceasefire, then elections, then talking about a constitution, rather than really addressing the elephant in the room. And I think this is a consequence of that. I think that Assad has, as I mentioned, realized that he or his regime will probably stay in power, and there's no real incentive by either Russia or the U.S. to, at the moment, kick him out. And keep in mind that Assad was the one that was calling for elections a long time ago. So all of this has happened. The regime's stance actually hasn't changed that much. And I think that's a big problem that the opposition has with their current negotiations.
Well, Renad Mansour, interesting as always. We have to leave it there, but thank you for joining us.